brilliance of humanity is in our ability to have ideas and then turn them into something that we share with the world. Human progress is built on this principle. And maybe you want to build a product or create a piece of content such as writing, music, video, etc. Or you simply just want to finish a piece of work for your teacher or for your boss, and you might have a very common question that all of these people experience. Is the thing that I've just done good enough? Well, with famous sayings like, if it's worth doing properly, or Henry Ford's quote saying, quality means doing it right even when no one is looking, we have this feeling that we should always do our absolute best, and we don't want to misrepresent ourselves or fail to do ourselves justice. And then equally, there's the issue that with social media, it feels like the whole world is watching you, or if you get no views on your content, it feels like the whole world has chosen to ignore you because you're useless. Well, if you ever feel that you might struggle with imposter syndrome, or simply second guess yourself around putting your ideas out there, this episode is to help put you in the right frame of mind to succeed. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, Samuel Webster Harris. As always, diving into growth mindset and breaking down the psychology of self-improvement. In this case, how to get better at doing stuff and not worrying about it. And I'm going to kick off with an analogy from business. So you may have heard the concept called product market fit. It also gets referred to as PMF in the startup world. And this is when your product matches exactly what the market needs and wants at a price that the market is willing to pay. There is a perfect harmony between the problem that consumers or users face and the solution that you have created to fix it. And they say that if you have time to ask if you have product market fit, you probably haven't found it yet. And once you have product market fit, you'll know. You'll be so busy fixing things that are breaking due to high demand to spend time assessing if people actually like your product or not. Servers will be going down, your stock will be empty. Everything that you're doing in your business is not to pursue new growth. It is just to remove any blockers from the growth you are already experiencing. And when you start a company, you are searching for PMF or product market fit. So you'll talk to users and you kind of expect to get a linear form of feedback based on the quality of your product. Like the better quality your product is, the more enthusiasm that you will get. And it'll be very easy to assess if the thing you're doing is good or not. And the first thing you'll realize from doing this is there's actually possible to create a bad product that doesn't help people and actually makes their lives worse. And you'll have to redraw your graph and allow for like a bad level of quality and be kind of humble about yourself. And the second thing you'll realize is that enthusiasm is not a linear relationship with quality, and it's not easy to assess where you're at. Basically, people will just agree with you and won't want to hurt your feelings. They'll be like, oh, isn't that lovely that you've done that? And they won't tell you that it's useless unless it's actually really bad. They'll just be like, oh, that's nice. And they just won't actually get around to buying it, which leaves you with a problem that you think people like your product and yet you're not selling anything. So there's a book called The Mum Test, which gives you a really good framework for reaching product market fit. It reminds you that mums will always be proud of the things that we make and tell us nice things where at all possible. So as long as you've got like a basic level of something good enough, they'll always tell you it's wonderful because humans don't want to make you feel bad. Like if you talk to anyone in person and they know that you made something, they're not going to try and hurt your feelings. They want you to like them. And that's more important than telling you whether your thing is not very good. So to get around this problem, you should pretend that your product isn't even yours. Otherwise you won't get impartial feedback. And secondly, you can try asking better questions. You can ask if they would actually use it, where they would use it, why they wouldn't use it. What do they currently use instead of the thing that you're offering? And what are the switching costs from what they currently use to the thing that you want them to use instead? You might also need to ask them some personal questions to identify the real impact that it would have on their life. What are their personal problems that they actually get really annoyed about each day? What are the other tasks that they're doing related to your product that they have to get done? And which are the things that actually don't matter? What are their other priorities? And this may sound a bit long-winded compared to someone that's just trying to like get their blog out there and you're like, why are you talking to me about this, Sam? But I'm about to get to the point. Someone that creates a product just needs to reinvent their product very rapidly as quickly as possible before they run out of money. And a mark of a good team that builds a business is actually how quickly they can change their product and iterate and how many experiments they can run in a given time window. It's the reason Mark Zuckerberg used the motto, move fast and break things. It's because he was constantly testing stuff and anything that didn't work, he could throw away instantly and find something that did work. So founders must really care about their users and the problems that those users have. And they can't be interested in the solution that they've already created and that they've already built as much as their users. Otherwise, they're never going to go anywhere. They have to be very willing to tear up their current work and expect it to not be good enough the first time and just do anything without worrying about the sunk costs they've already experienced. If they move slowly, they can sink their entire company. And some examples of companies that completely reinvented themselves to reach product market fit would be Twitter, which was originally a podcasting app and not a message board. Twitch was originally a live stream of one single guy's life and nothing to do with gaming. Graze used to make high quality fresh fruit snacks before they turned into a dried food delivery company. These companies all reached greatness because they changed their products massively. And the real sign that you want to prove that you have product market fit is not people willing to pay for it or saying that they like it. It's actually people saying they would be genuinely sad if they can't have your product anymore. And so if you ask people how disappointed they would be if they can't use your product, if they say very disappointed, that's a good sign. And you want to have 40% of people saying that they would be very disappointed if they can no longer use your business. And if you aren't there yet, you need to keep on changing what it is that you do until you get there. And so we see that excellent products are not just a lucky guess, like someone just invented something and everyone bought it. It's a result of the founder's excellent ability to seek truth and solve problems. And you can apply this all to creation. Feedback is the same for anything that you make. As they say, feedback is a gift. Now, we can easily ask people if what we have done is good. Yet when we make something truly awesome, we shouldn't need to ask anyone, they'll tell us. If you tell someone a joke, you know if it was funny because they'll laugh. If it wasn't funny, they weren't laughing. And it's the same for any creation. People tell us when we do something that connects with them at a deep level. They'll get excited, they'll get emotional about it. If you play music that is brilliant, people dance, people sing, they'll follow you and they'll get hold of your music. If you make art that is beautiful, it will make people wonder. They'll take photos, they'll buy your work. If you write content that is incredible, people will write back telling you that you've blown their minds, that you've changed their lives. They'll share your writing for you. They'll read everything you create from top to bottom, and they'll wait eagerly for your next installment. If you're asking people about the quality of your work isn't good enough yet. If you're trawling through your analytics trying to find out if your content is good, it isn't good enough yet. But you just need to ask better questions of your work and iterate faster to reach work that is better. So I have genuinely been looking at the podcast comments lately and trying to find ways to change what it is that I do on the podcast. And it has been getting better. It has been growing really well for the past 3 months. And I honestly do have some failures here on my podcast. I started it 5 years ago and it quickly grew to like 10,000 listeners an episode, which was kind of like the gold standard on podcasts as far as being able to get advertisers and have a podcast that people are actually listening to, as opposed to just a place where you can talk into the void. But it kind of stayed there. It went up and down sometimes with the years, but generally stayed fairly level. But by last year, it actually started to sort of descend because I just really hadn't iterated that much or bothered to change. I was just enjoying what I was doing, but I wasn't really trying to change it. And recently I've realized that podcasting is really great. It does fit into the rest of my life very well. Instead of treating it as just like a side hustle that's kind of fun for me, thinking like, actually, if I do this well, this could be my job, but it's still only a job that takes 2 days a week and I can go and run around having fun the rest of the time and come up with better philosophy and better ideas to put into the podcast. And I should really be more intentional about the podcast and make it something that people really want to come back to and just get lots of value from. And it's easy for me to look at other podcasters that started recently and they have been getting feedback of telling them like how amazing their podcast is and why it's like the best thing ever and just growing super fast and be like, okay, I can definitely iterate on my podcast to get it to something that is like that. Because I do get feedback, which is nice, but not in like copious quantities, which would be nicer. So I'm definitely aiming towards that. And if you have any advice for me, feel free to email me at growthmindsetpodcast@gmail.com. I would love any comments of what you'd like to hear more of or what you'd like to hear less of. And fundamentally, so far from what I've learned is that generally my shorter episodes where I'm just talking, people prefer. And as this is a podcast that's meant to be about psychology, doing interviews where I actually find like psychologists and sort of talk about one specific topic that I'm truly fascinated in is going to be better than doing more like life story interviews with cool people. Or if I do those, have a bit of a more scientific approach to them. And that's actually really cool. Like I would love to do that. And so that's what I'm doing. And it's really exciting to be working hard on it and making a thing about it. I'm currently in the Himalayas for 3 months where I'm becoming a mountain guide. And it's nice to be able to do that whilst also running a podcast that I'm taking seriously, unlike everybody else that's here in the Himalayas with me who I've actually had to drop everything. And so I feel pretty blessed to have this. So thank you for listening on that note. Anyway, get back to the lesson. The lesson is if whatever you're doing isn't getting serious love or growing really fast, it does need to change. As Alex Hormozi says, if your work isn't growing, it's dying. And like for podcasting, for example, the actual amount of listeners is growing by like 10% every year. So if your podcast isn't growing by like 10% every year, that means it's actually getting smaller technically in one aspect. And there's just more and more people getting into podcasting, trying to make better, more interesting and better things for users out there. So if you keep on doing the same thing, you're going to end up going backwards. And one thing I have to say that is the biggest myth in all content creation is that people say it just takes time. If you just show up week in, week out, and you can wait for time to work its magic. Like, no. If you keep on doing the same thing for years on end, that's a recipe for going nowhere and wasting lots of your time. Your content doesn't just need another year of you doing the same thing for people to finally find out about what you're doing and listen to it. If you approach your content more like a good founder, you would test your ideas and you try different things. I'm sure you're interested in more than one thing, and you can find plenty of things that you could be passionate about that you would enjoy doing, and you'll find something that finally resonates with an audience. And there's no excuse for anyone to not have a giant podcast if they approach it like a business. Ideas are really cheap. It's just the execution that matters. So if you are a creator, you need to start hustling like a founder, or even like I did mention at the start, like people that are just putting their work in for their bosses. You can still talk to other people in your company and get a better idea of how to make work that is brilliant and really outshines everyone else. If you're creating anything, you should follow the same rules as the mum test. Talk to as many people as possible about what they love and what they hate, about what their problems are in their lives, that whatever it is that you're creating is trying to solve, and the things that those people are fascinated in. Pitch them different ideas as if those ideas aren't even your own. Pretend someone else came up with the idea, or try and get them to listen or read something, or say that you listened to or read something about this topic that someone else created the podcast about, and see if they are actually interested to like follow that podcast as well, rather than saying that this is your own podcast and asking them to listen, because they're always like, oh, wow, you run a podcast, I'll listen. And then they won't listen. Importantly, don't feel any attachment to any of the ideas that you have. People have this like sense of ego that just because they had the idea, it must be brilliant, when it's just not. Like I was in a workshop that I was helping run where we were going on about the fact that like interviews with people who aren't famous about just like their lives and stuff are not going to succeed anymore because of there's a million podcasts out there. And I don't need to hear about someone who's not interesting and hasn't done anything with their lives. And then this lady was like, pitched us her podcast idea, who was like, I'm doing interviews with like random people over coffee, and it's going to be great because of it's over coffee. It's going to be like a personal thing. And we're like, you really haven't listened to what we've said, because I just don't care. There's so many amazing podcasts out there. I'm not just going to listen to you chatting to someone over coffee. But she just didn't get that her idea was crap. And we kind of get lost in the fact that like, just because we've thought of something or we're doing it, that everyone else is interested in it, and they really aren't. You don't get to decide what is good. You have to listen to people. You have to kill your darlings, and you have to just work out what is good based on feedback. You can quickly test things. You can see what resonates, and just don't get stuck with an idea because of it's what you're already doing. Your current mediocre work that you do is blocking you from doing brilliant work. The question of is your work good enough is a really important question to be asking. Whether you're making a YouTube video or a piece of music or even a work report for your boss, just make something that over-delivers. Craft the experience so that consumer feels it was perfectly made for them. Look only for sheer joy that someone can't hide when they truly love something. Make people like your work so much they would be disappointed to lose it. And keep iterating on your work as quickly as possible. Once you do something that is brilliant, it will explode. The algorithms are there on YouTube, even on podcasting, on blogs. If you do something incredible, people will share it. It will get seen. If your work is incredible for your boss, they will be disappointed if you leave, and they will want to pay you more. Don't wait around for whoever your audience is to improve over time. The world is changing very fast. It will only get less interested in whatever it is that you're currently doing. And there will only be more and more competition stealing your audience's interest. But that's an opportunity. Instead, you can keep changing and improving yourself over time and become brilliant. Now, a common problem for people is that they like to make excuses. And this mindset will really screw you over. It's easy to find a lot of reasons for a lack of interest or a lack of growth in the work that you do. You might think that blogs were last decade. You might think that nobody reads emails anymore. You might think that podcasts aren't designed for search and can't be found, that your podcast needs to be celebrities, that your podcast will only work if it has celebrities on it, and that there's just too many podcasts out there anyway. You might think that YouTube is too competitive, or that it's too late to join TikTok, or that if you're in the music industry, you just can't break through without a record label behind you, or if you make art, that it can't be done unless you're an insider that knows how to get into galleries. Well, sure. As Nelson Mandela said, It always seems impossible until it's done. And there's a Chinese proverb that says, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. The uncomfortable truth is that in any channel, there are people starting today and they are going viral. They are succeeding. They are working harder than you and they are working on the right thing. Or if they're working on the wrong thing, they will change it to the right thing. These people will grow blazingly fast because they make something that resonates with an audience somewhere. Now, they may have done it on their first attempt, or they may have iterated 100 times to get there. For example, Mr. Beast was making videos for 4 years before he had his first video go viral. And it wasn't like any of the videos that he'd done before. It was a much bolder and more stupid video in so many ways, but he didn't stop there. He was obsessed with viewers' interests and their behaviors. He kept testing different ideas to craft his formula that made him the biggest YouTuber on the planet. And what's interesting is my first YouTube video got 500,000 views. And at about the same time that Mr. Beast started his YouTube, and I ignored YouTube, I'm not a big YouTuber, whereas he got like 0 views and just carried on for 4 years, trying different things and just hasn't stopped for the last 8 years. And now is massive, which just goes to show that perhaps I could be 10 times bigger than Mr. Beast if I carried on. Who knows? Jokes. What it goes to show is that if you dedicate to a single channel and just friggin' keep on iterating and improving, you will eventually get there and your work will become good enough, even if it isn't good enough yet. And now other YouTubers are copying Mr. Beast's formula, but he didn't copy anyone. He kept reinventing himself. So anyone that copies Mr. Beast now will only ever make something that is like Mr. Beast. And so they will always be in competition with Mr. Beast, and they will always be worse than Mr. Beast because they aren't him. So whatever you're doing, try and be unique to yourself is also a useful thing to think about. And of course, final thing is don't be insane. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting new results. The only insane thing that you want is your levels of personal growth and your levels of viewership or readership growth or job opportunities, whatever growth it is that you're looking for. Excellent products, as I've said, require excellent founders that don't have an ego and are willing to change things. And in the same way, excellent creators don't get stuck thinking what they do is the best. If they want to make something epic, they're always willing to look at themselves and be humble and seek feedback that isn't necessarily what they want to hear. Be ready to reinvent yourself and your work to find new ways to amaze people. The nicest way that I could write it was that you should never wait for your audience to improve over time. You should only use time to improve yourself. And on that, I hope something resonated with you. Whether you have a normal job, whether you want to be a creator online, ultimately we all do stuff, and getting better at making that and reaching a point where the stuff that we do amazes other people is a really nice feeling. And I believe more people would get there if they realized that it's not purely just down to like innate talent, but actually just open-mindedness and willingness for growth. Perhaps when I started this episode, you might be like, why is this relating to growth mindset? But hopefully by the end of this, you realize that to become excellent at stuff and to have work that is good enough requires a massive growth mindset and willingness to change who we are and look for feedback everywhere around us. So thank you so much for listening. As I've mentioned, I, of course, try to adopt a growth mindset. And so if you have any feedback for the podcast on things you'd like to hear more of, things you'd like to hear less of, any science out there that we need to sort of dig into with a researcher, I would love to hear about. And if this episode resonated with you, then sharing some love on the comment section in Spotify or giving me a good rating on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple would be lovely. As I've mentioned, this is my life now. That would be great. As always, life is to be enjoyed. You're only going to get older, and putting things off like enjoying yourself is a fool's game and will only leave you disappointed in life. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too. Thanks for listening.